The crystal bowls were already sweating when my mother raised her glass and said, "To families, especially to the ones who finally learn their place." Her smile found me like a sniper sighting. The room laughed the way people laugh when they don't understand the joke but want to be in on it. Heat crawled up my neck and pressed against my ears. I set down the tray of mini quiches I had baked that morning because I couldn't afford a catered spread like my sister could, and suddenly, even the tray looked cheap in my hands. "Put those there, honey," Mom added as if she were correcting a clumsy waitress. "Next to the good food." I moved toward the end of the table, where the catered towers of shrimp and glistening fruit held a kind of smug posture. Someone, Aunt Mal, pulled my sleeve. "Darling, you forgot to garnish?" She whispered loudly enough for the front row of cousins to hear. Parsley would have hidden the rustic look. Rustic. That was generous. I had felt proud of them in my small kitchen that still smelled like a bread commercial. Proud the way you feel when your hands have created something that didn't exist before. But under the chandelier, my quiches were suddenly orphan pies, needed by desperation. I set the tray down. The party churned. Music from a Bluetooth speaker fought with the clatter of ice in tumblers. At the center was my younger sister, Lila, glowing in the expensive way. It was her engagement dinner. Her second, actually. The first had been a micro brunch in the city with her fiance's friends, and now this was the ultimate family celebration at my mother's house, which was large in that obvious way meant to be seen by people who might be impressed. Leela wore white because irony was a private game she liked to play. When she caught my eye, she gave me a smile that used to mean we shared a secret, but tonight it felt like she was returning something I'd lent and she'd improved. "Ems," she called, my nickname since forever. "Can you take a photo of us by the fireplace? The lighting is like perfect." "Sure," I said. My throat felt lined with grit. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and wiped my fingertips on a napkin as if touching the camera would leave flower prints on the moment. Leela leaned into her fiancé, Chase. Tall, immaculate, the color of a good tan someone else paid for. He slid an arm around her waist and whispered something that made her drop her head onto his shoulder. I lifted the phone and framed them with the painting above the mantel, the one Mom had commissioned after Dad left, in which we were all too perfect, frozen in a sundae. We never had father present, mother serene, daughter symmetrical. My finger hovered. I watched Lila's ring catch the light and scatter it across her throat like pixels of ordained happiness. "Okay, 1, 2, I began. "What?" Mom said, gliding into frame. She touched Lila's cheek, adjusted Chase's lapel, then looked at me as if I were a piece of furniture she'd placed incorrectly years ago. "Ema, honey, step back. When you're close like that, it emphasizes the imperfections." I stepped back because that is what I had done for years, practiced a choreography in which I always landed behind the beat. The laughter rose again, the air turning into a froth I could barely breathe. I took the photo. Another. Then another where Leela tilted her chin and Chase's smile sharpened. The images couldn't capture the sound of Mom's voice as she cooed, "This is what success looks like?" But I thought the hardness at the edge of their pupils might tell the truth later. When I handed Leela her phone, Mom clapped her hands for attention. The room bent toward her like iron filings to a magnet. She had that gift, the performance of sincerity that made people wish they were the object of it. "Everyone," she trilled, "it is time for a toast." We gathered, the circle closing, and I found myself at the edge, next to a bronze sculpture of a leaping fish Dad had once hated. Leela took her place in the center as if it had been marked with tape. Chase moved to her right, hand in his pocket, wedding teeth ready. Mom lifted her flute and waited, milking silence until we were all hungry for the sound of her again. "To my darling daughter," she began. "To Leela, who has always been a light in this family." She paused, giving each of us a second to imagine the light and the shadows it created. "She was born shining, you know? Some of us are just born for more." I could feel the sentence gather itself on her tongue before she spoke it, the way you know a storm will break because the air has gone too still. I had heard versions of it all my life, but tonight there was a new varnish. The audience, the stakes, the ring on Leela's finger, the way Mom's anticline of self-pity and self-congratulation balanced perfectly as she looked at me, just for a heartbeat, then back to Leela. "And what a journey it's been," she said. "From honor rolls to award ceremonies to that incredible job. Leela has always made us proud." She leaned forward just a little, like a friend sharing gossip. "Some children need more time. Some wander. Her eyes caught mine for the second time and stayed some bake. A ripple went through the circle like wind in wheat. My hands found each other, fingers knitting too tight. I felt my mouth shape a half smile that said, "It's okay, we do this, we survive this." But Mom wasn't done. "And that's okay," she said, "a benevolent queen. We need bakers. We need practical girls. Not everyone can be a star. If everyone were a star, who would arrange them?" I heard the small human sounds around me, glass against tooth, a cough disguised as a laugh, Chase's little snort, but inside, everything went silent and white and flat. I was no longer standing in a room. I was a paper doll propped against a table leg. I thought of the morning's flour on my counter, the dough under my nails, the note Leela had texted last night. "Could you maybe bring some of her mini things? The caterer doesn't do homely vibes, and we want to mix lol." And the way I said yes, because I always said yes, because saying no felt like pushing a door everyone else wanted open. "Mum," Leela said gently, maybe sensing the edge. "Don't make it weird." "I'm not," Mom protested, the petulant woundedness at the ready. "I'm saying she has a gift, she does. We all have levels. It's nothing to be ashamed of." Then she lifted her glass higher, "To Leela, and to marrying your equal." The glasses rose like a field of identically bred flowers. I lifted mine because I had to, the bubbles touching my lip and making a sound like a tiny scream. They swallowed, and Leela laughed, and someone started a chant, "Speech, speech," because humiliation is a buffet that encourages second helpings. Chase delivered an easy joke about how he had traded up and how his laws are the best kind of intimidating. And Mom did the "I shouldn't say this, but I will" routine about Leela being hard to keep up with. The room's temperature shifted from warmth to fever. I made for the kitchen, the place where a person can have a purpose that looks like leaving. The island was covered with the aftermath of creation: olive pits, a limp ribbon, the smear of a berry that had surrendered its color. I pressed my palms to the cool counter. For a second, my eyes stung and I let them, ripping the seam before pulling it tight again. I could leave. I could walk out and text, "Stomach thing, love you, so proud." And they would continue with their toasts and their gleaming. And tomorrow there would be a group chat photo without me, and I would be a gap no one noticed because their arms were already around each other. "Baby," said a voice I knew but wished I didn't in that moment. I turned. Mom was in the doorway, face arranged into concern, the mask she wore when she wanted something. "Don't be sensitive." "I'm not." I lied because the truth would be a knife. "I needed water." "I was complimenting you," she said, soft, like I was a skittish animal who might bolt. "People admire women who are content with simple things." "I'm not content," I said before I could stop myself, the words landing like a glass breaking very close to the floor but not shattering. "I'm working." A Mom's smile tilted. "On what, honey? On what?" The question that, in her mouth, was a verdict. I felt something in me, long frayed, snap, and the sound it made was quiet, a thread freeing itself in a hem. "On myself," I said, and watched her face do a small, involuntary flinch, like I'd said a dirty word at church. She recovered. "Well," she said, patting the air, "don't take it the wrong way. You know I have high standards. For everyone. Leela's wedding is important. Optics matter. Optics," I repeated. "We're your family, not a brand. You say that like it's different," she said briskly. Then she softened with practiced ease. "Come back in, all right? Don't make this about you." I laughed, a short sound scraped from the bottom of my lungs. "I wouldn't dream of it." She held my eyes a second longer, something calculating passing through her gaze. "Good girl," she said, and left, the syllables trailing her like perfume. I stood until the murmurs grew loud again, until the fridge hummed its dull sympathy. Then I did something I'd never done at one of Mom's events. I took out my phone and walked to the back door. The evening was a blue bruise. The lawn stretched in curated steps toward a fence so pristine it looked theoretical. I slipped into the night and let the door size shut behind me. The cicadas were out, singing their electric heartbreak. Somewhere in the neighbor's yard, a dog barked at the way the dark changes your house. I sank onto the cold stone step and folded my arms, pinning myself together like a letter that doesn't want to be opened. I breathed. The sky breathed back. My phone lit with a text. "Leela, where are you? Everyone's doing shots, lol." I watched the three dots blink, vanish, blink again. "Leela, Mom said you were being weird. You okay?" I typed, erase, typed, "I'm fine. Be right in. Tell Chase to save me a shot." Her reply came with a confetti effect. "That's my girl. Don't be dramatic tonight. It's my turn." My turn. The phrase rang in me like a bell someone had meant to call a horse. I looked through the window where, in a better movie, I would see people realizing they had gone too far, that the person they wanted to keep small was the one holding the lintel up. But all I saw was Mom lifting a platter like a queen carrying the head of some defeated enemy, and Lila pivoting as if cameras hunted her for prey. Don't be dramatic, I repeated to the night. It's her turn, and it had been her turn, hadn't it, in so many ways for so many years. Every year another door opened for her, as if the world had a concierge, and I'd guarded those doors, holding them from the other side when the wind wanted to slam them shut, telling myself that being the hinge was its own honor, that sacrifice was love. The door behind me opened and closed. Footsteps approached, careful on gravel. I figured I'd find you hiding, said Aiden's voice, soft and unassuming, the texture of a good sweater. He was our cousin-ish, technically the son of Mom's best friend, which meant he'd been at our house enough times to know where to find the hidden matches and which floorboards creaked. He sat beside me, leaving a small, kind gap that could be crossed if needed. One company. I didn't trust my voice. I nodded. He held out a bottle of water like peace. I took it, unscrewed the cap to hear something give. You should go back inside, I said. They'll think I've corrupted you. He huffed. They already think that. We sat, listening to the party's muffled laughter, to the way joy can sound like a foreign language when you've forgotten your password. After a minute, Aiden said, I heard what your mom said. Which part? I'd asked deadpan. The part where I'm the baker, the practical girl, the arranged star. He chuckled, then sobered. The part where she put a ceiling on you in public and called it a compliment. The words were a balm and a bruise at once. She's been practicing that trick since I was 8, I said. It's her longest running show? She's wrong, he said, and his voice had a new edge, one I hadn't noticed before. You know that, right? I don't know, quiet volcanic. Is that a flavor? I asked, and I felt a smile sneak at the corner of my mouth because he meant it. He always meant it. It will be when you bake it. He nudged my shoulder with his. Come on, they're playing at being happy. You can play at it too. Then leave whenever you want. I stared at my hands, at the little crescent moons of nail beds. She said not to make it about me. It's never about you, he said, and the truth of it snapped into place like a seatbelt. That's the problem. We went back inside because survival has rules. The heat hit my face and the music braided itself into my spine. People were playing a game now, one of those parlor games designed to be charming and to reveal character in ways that made you regret the invitation. 2 truths and a lie, Leela announced, standing on the hearth like a royal who'd been born at a higher altitude. But make it engagement edition. Chase and I will go first. They did the cute couple thing, and everyone applauded the lie like it was courage. Then the game passed to the aunts, who used theirs to brag about personal trainers and the grout colors in their second homes. It came around and around the circle, and I thought maybe I am invisible, maybe they won't see me. Maybe if I breathe shallow, I can flatten myself into a wallpaper pattern and no one will. Ema, Mom sang. Your turn. The room pivoted. I felt the air shift like a camera panning. I could lie, I thought. I could make something small harmless. I could say, I once ate a whole watermelon, or I can recite all the state capitals, or I once met a TV anchor at the airport and she was shorter than she looks. I could smile, and they would smile back, and the game would skim over me like a skipping stone. My truths are boring, I said lightly. You know me? That's the lie. Aden murmured from his place by the piano. I shot him a look that said please not now and thank you anyway. Come on, Mom coaxed. Make it entertaining. No one likes a wet blanket. And there it was, the key stuck under the welcome mat. Be fun for us, dazzle us. Make us feel good about how we feel about you. I put my glass down. I didn't want to tell the truth, not yet, not when it could be used as a party trick. But a different truth pressed against my teeth, one I could give without handing them a weapon. Okay, I said. 2 truths and a lie. I looked at Leela and saw only the voice of our childhood racing down halls and slamming into me. I once got straight A's an entire semester and Mom asked me why they weren't A pluses. I baked 200 cookies for the church fundraiser and someone called them store-bought with a sob story. And I'm happy. A hush fell that didn't feel respectful. It felt like the moment you realize the ocean has pulled back too far. Leela laughed first, too loudly. We all got straight A's, M's. That's not special. Mom's mouth a perfect bow. And you are happy, she said, not as a question, aren't you? I held her gaze. That one might be the lie. Someone Aunt Mal made a noise. The stem of her wine glass chirping on the coffee table. Chase shifted, discomfort dancing across his face before he smoothed it. He said, one of mine was going to be that I bench pressed my body weight, but now I feel like a sociopath. Lauder burst, a relief valve opening, and the night rollicked forward as if it had tripped but not fallen. I stood there, dizzy with how quickly a confession can be turned into decor. Eden caught my eye, eyebrows up in question. I shook my head, not yet, not here. The music was louder now, something with too much bass to be conversational. People were dancing in that restrained way nice families dance, which is to say they were swaying like reeds while pretending to be trees. Leela pulled me into a selfie that smelled like champagne and citrusy hair oil. Caption sisters by chance. Besties by choice, she said and giggled. God, I look good. You look cute too. Thanks, I said. I used to take that crumb and call it dinner. I used to go home full of swallowed things. But as I watched the bodies move, as I watched my mother navigate the room like a hostess in a magazine called How to Win, as I watched my sister's ring carve light into the air, something colder settled in me, a clarity like the first sharp star. It didn't feel like anger. It felt like the moment the match catches and you understand, suddenly, that fire has been living inside wood all along. They would say this was Leela's night, that I was selfish for wanting anything in it, even the space to breathe. They would blame me for the bruise and not the hand. They would put a ribbon on my silence and call it grace. So I smiled and fetched more ice. I laughed at the right places. I let the night lay its little eggs of comment and suggestion. I helped carry gifts to the dining room where Mom insisted they be arranged for a photograph to send to the magazine. I nodded when Aunt Mal took me aside and lifted my hair like she was appraising produce. You could be pretty, she said, like it was a debt I'd failed to pay. If you tried. Outside, the cicadas grew louder, a chorus of insistence. The party swelled to a scripted ending. People hug the way you hug when you know it will look good on social media later. Chase clapped my shoulder in a man-to-man gesture he must have learned in a seminar. You're the best, he said, as if awarding a ribbon at the petting zoo. Seriously. Leela's lucky to have a sister who stays in her lane. I learned from the best, I said, and I didn't know who I meant until Mom swept by and kissed the air near my cheek. When the door finally closed on the last cousin, the house exhaled. The clink of cleanup replaced the clamor of celebration. Mom turned to me the way a director turns to an understudy after a performance. Thank you for helping, she said. You were fine. High praise, I said. My voice was steady. I had stitched myself tight. I just worry about you, she said, the opening line of a monologue I could recite in my sleep. You're at that age where choices calcify. You don't want to wake up and realize you missed your window. My window for what? I asked. For being you. For being someone, she said, and the softness vanished, the steel glinted. Not everyone gets endless chances. Your sister is doing it right. She's aligning if you paid attention. I am paying attention, I said, calm as a stone at the bottom of a clear river. I have been paying attention my whole life. She blinked, recalibrating. Don't be dramatic, Emma. It's unattractive. Then you should love me, I said, and for a second, the truth hung in the air like a chandelier without wires. She recovered first. Go to bed, she said, with a smile that made room dirty. You have an early morning, don't you? Farmer's market? Or is it your little class? My class, I said, and the words tasted new even though I'd been saying them for a month. The night course. The one I'd been paying for piecemeal with the farmer's market cash, the one I hadn't told her was advanced, not introductory. Yes, she tilted her head. Well, good luck with that. I nodded and went upstairs to the guest room that used to be mine. The bedspread was still the one we'd chosen when I was 16, a violent floral that didn't match the person who slept under it. I closed the door and leaned against it, and the house made its old house noises, settling, remembering. In the mirror, my face looked like a paper left in the rain and dried too quickly. I took my notebook from my bag. The cover was soft with use, the edges singed from an oven accident months ago, the pages full of measurements and margins and notes like small prayers. But the back half was a different language of steps, timelines, names, the kind of lists you make when you stop being a hinge and remember that doors swing both ways. I wrote a sentence and circled it until the circle was a tunnel enough. Downstairs, I could hear Mom telling Leela how to write the thank you notes in a way that would double as networking. I could hear Leela's sweet assent. I could hear the dishwasher opening, closing, water rushing in, the white noise of a life run like a business. I turned the page and wrote the date. Then I began to plan in earnest. Not food, not flowers, not favors to hand out at someone else's triumph. A different kind of menu, a different kind of feast. When I finally put down the pen, the house was quiet. Lila's door had clicked shut. Mom's heels had stopped pacing. The refrigerator hummed like a patient animal. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling where the light made the faintest web. I thought of Aiden's phrase, quiet volcanic. I thought of Mom telling me not to be sensitive, like sensitivity was an offense against her. I thought of the way Lila had said it's my turn and how the room had agreed, had always agreed, because no one had ever asked a different question. I could feel it under my ribs, that small, precise heat. Not the wildfire kind that makes you reckless, the kiln kind that makes you careful. There are things you can make only when the temperature is right and the timing is exact. There are vessels that hold because you respected the process. I closed my eyes and saw the painting over the mantel as it should have been, not us frozen in a lie of symmetry, but the three of us in motion. Mom reaching, Leela reaching past me, standing, steady, a line through which the electricity must pass. I saw myself not outside the frame, not behind the camera, not whispered about as the practical girl, the baker. I saw my hands. I saw what they could do. Enough? I said into the dark, and the room said it back. In the morning, they would wake to a house that still smelled like victory. They would see the photos and swipe and post and tag. They would call and coo and coordinate and congratulate. The world would say yes to them because it always had, and I would begin the work of teaching it another word. When I was a child, I thought my mother's voice was the most beautiful sound in the world. It was the kind of voice people lean toward at PTA meetings. That could calm an entire Sunday school class with a single, "Children, please." I used to close my eyes when she read me bedtime stories, letting the cadence fold around me like a blanket. I believe deep in my bones that if she spoke, the world would pause to listen. And maybe it did. The trouble was, it only paused for her, never for me. I was 7 when I first noticed the difference. It was a school talent show, the kind where every parent brought a camcorder the size of a bread box and the gymnasium smelled like popcorn and varnish. Leela, 5 years old, barely able to tie her own shoes, had announced she would sing. She marched to the stage in a dress that shimmered like tinfoil and belted out, "Twinkle, twinkle," with the confidence of a Vegas headliner. The audience erupted. I clapped so hard my palms burned. Later, when it was my turn, I sat on the edge of the stage with my little sketch pad. I had drawn 3 short cartoons about our cat, Mr. Whiskers, and I thought maybe if I read them aloud, people would laugh. My voice shook. The microphone squealed. A couple of kids giggled at the wrong parts. I stumbled over my words. When I finished, there was polite applause, the kind people give a plane landing on time. In the car afterward, Mom swooped Leela into her lap, crooning, "My little songbird." Did you hear the way she held that note? Natural talent. She kissed Leela's forehead and smoothed her hair. Then, turning to me in the back seat, she said, "Emma, sweetheart, maybe you're more behind the scenes. Support is a gift too." Support. I was 7 years old, and already I was being cast as the girl in the wings, the one holding the flashlight while someone else got the spotlight. And the strangest part, I accepted it. I wanted so badly to be what my mother believed I was, even if it meant shrinking to fit. It only got worse as we grew. Leela was always the star, not just in our house, but in the entire neighborhood. If she joined soccer, the team won trophies. If she auditioned for the school play, she got the lead role. She had the kind of effortless charisma that drew teachers to bend rules and classmates to orbit her. And me. I was the one people forgot was in the room until someone needed an errand run or homework copied. I wasn't invisible. Exactly, I was useful. There's a difference, though it took me years to see it. Dad used to be the one who noticed me. Before he left, he was the quiet balance to Mom's performance. He'd come into the kitchen while I baked my first lopsided cookies and murmur, "These taste like sunshine, kiddo." He bought me sketchbooks and left little notes, "Keep drawing. You have something in you." He sat with me at piano recitals and whispered, "Doesn't matter if you hit the wrong notes. Just play loud enough so people know you mean it." But then he was gone. One day it was weekend fishing trips and silly pancake faces. The next it was court papers and every other Thanksgiving visits. After the divorce, Dad's voice became tinny on the phone, filtered through long distance guilt. I still loved him, but he became a ghost parent, warm in memory, unreliable in presence. And without him, there was no one left to stand between me and mom's expectations. Don't slouch, Emma. Why can't you smile like your sister? You're lucky she includes you. It was a constant drip, drip, drip. Not enough to drown me outright, but enough that I never felt dry. And the thing about slow drowning is you learn to hold your breath for a very long time. Leela, to her credit, wasn't always cruel. When we were little, she used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare and whisper, "Tell me a story, Ems." I'd make up silly tales about cats running candy shops or astronauts who lived in tree houses, and she'd giggle until she fell asleep. For those moments, she was my sister again, not my competitor. But as we got older, she learned to enjoy the way people adored her. Compliments were her oxygen, and she inhaled deeply. Soon, she discovered that standing taller meant I looked smaller, and she liked it that way. High school sealed the hierarchy. When Lila entered as a freshman, I was already a junior. I had spent 2 years trying to carve a space for myself, art club, choir, yearbook committee. But the second she showed up, it was over. Teachers who had once praised me suddenly said, "Oh, you're Lila's sister," as though my identity were a prequel to hers. Friends who used to hang out with me drifted into her orbit. At home, mom doubled down, bragging to relatives about Leela's homecoming crown while reminding me to be supportive and let her shine. I remember one particular night like it seared into my skin. It was Leela's 16th birthday party. Mom had rented a hall, hired a DJ, strung fairy lights across the ceiling. Leela arrived in a limousine. Yes, a limo, like she was a celebrity arriving at a movie premiere. When she stepped out, people screamed her name. My job, apparently, was to stand by the punch bowl and refill cups like a volunteer at a charity event. At one point, I overheard a group of girls giggling near the bathroom. "Emma's nice," one said, but she's so plain. Like she fades into the wallpaper. Total background character. They laughed, and I stood frozen, holding a stack of napkins, my throat burning. Later that night, as Leela blew out 16 candles, Mom leaned into the microphone and said, "Make a wish, darling. Though really, you already have everything." And then, for the audience's benefit, she gestured toward me and added, "Emma, don't be jealous. You'll get your moment someday." Someday. That word became my prison sentence. A promise with no date. College didn't save me either. I thought maybe if I left, if I reinvented myself far from home, I'd finally breathe. But mom's voice followed me in every phone call, every holiday break. And Leela, of course, kept thriving, internships, scholarships, men who looked at her like she was gravity. Meanwhile, I worked two part-time jobs just to afford rent, sneaking into the campus kitchen to bake because it was the only place I felt like myself. I still remember bringing a tin of cookies to a study group, watching classmates bite into them, their eyes widening. "Emma, these are insane. You should sell these." My heart soared for a second. But then someone asked, "Wait, aren't you Leela's sister? She's gorgeous." And just like that, my cookies were forgotten. I was forgotten. When I graduated quietly without honors, mom didn't even attend. She claimed she was helping Leela move into her new apartment downtown and couldn't be in two places at once. Leela sent flowers, posted a throwback photo of us as kids with the caption, "Congrats to my sis. Couldn't have done it without you," as if my existence was a supporting role in her movie. Years passed like this. My life became a pattern of almosts, almost recognized, almost valued, almost enough. Each time I thought I'd carved out a little place for myself, someone, usually mom or Leela, reminded me where I belonged. And yet I never stopped dreaming, baking, sketching, late night notes in journals no one read. My secret life was full of ideas, sparks I never dared show, because if I showed them, mom would critique, Leela would overshadow, and the world would yawn. Better to hide the light than watch it mocked. Still, there were moments when I glimpsed what could be. Like the time my friend Maria convinced me to sell cupcakes at a local farmer's market. I stood behind a folding table, nervous, certain no one would stop. But people did stop. They bought, they smiled. One woman even came back the next week asking if I could make a custom batch for her son's birthday. I drove home that day with cash in my pocket and a wild thought in my chest. Maybe I'm not invisible after all. Of course, when I told mom, she laughed. "That's cute, Emma. But don't fool yourself. Selling sweets on a sidewalk isn't a career, it's a hobby. Leave the big things to your sister." And I did. For too long, I did. That's the cruelest part of being constantly diminished. You start to believe it. You start to think small, dream small, live small, because anything bigger feels like a betrayal. And maybe that's why her words at the engagement dinner cut so deep. Because it wasn't the first time she'd belittled me, it was the culmination. A lifetime of being told I was second rate, distilled into one champagne soaked toast. That night, standing in the kitchen with Aiden, I realized something had changed. The drip, drip, drip of her cruelty had finally filled the glass, and the glass had shattered. The days following the engagement dinner felt like walking through fog with weights tied to my ankles. I told myself to let it go, to shrug off my mother's words the way I'd shrugged them off 1,000 times before, but something about the way she said it in front of everyone. Some bake, some shine, lodged under my skin like a splinter. Every time I brushed against it, pain flared, small but insistent. I threw myself into routine. I woke early, baked for the farmer's market, packed my little hatchback with crates of muffins and bread. The familiar smell of cinnamon and sugar should have been comfort. But even in the safety of my kitchen, I heard her voice, content with simple things, practical girl, not a star. At the market that Saturday, regular customers stopped by smiling, handing over crumpled bills. Ema, you've outdone yourself again? These are my husband's favorite. One man asked if I catered weddings. For a second, warmth spread through me like melted butter. Maybe I was building something, brick by quiet brick. But then my phone buzzed with a family group chat notification. Mom, don't forget brunch at Liz tomorrow. Should you practice for hosting? Leela, it'll be chic but casual lol. Everyone wear something light. Mom, Emma, maybe avoid that green sweater. Doesn't photograph well. My thumb hovered over the screen. The customers around me laughed and haggled, unaware that I was standing in quicksand. I typed, I'll see if I can make it, then deleted it, typed sure and hit send. Because that's what I did. I showed up. Leela's apartment was a cathedral of glass and chrome, sunlight bouncing off surfaces too perfect to touch. I carried a basket of fresh scones, warm and wrapped in linen. Leela opened the door, radiant as always, her hair cascading in effortless waves. Oh, Ems, you didn't have to bring anything, she said, taking the basket without looking at it. Would already have plenty. She set it on the counter, next to trays of artisanal cheese and imported pastries. My scones looked like intruders at a black tigala. The family gathered around the long white table. Mom immediately launched into hosting mode. Look at this place. So elegant. Leela, you have such an eye. She smoothed her blouse, casting a glance at me. Emma, take notes. Presentation matters. I sat quietly sipping water, trying not to crumble. Then came the games. Leela loved orchestrating little bonding activities. Today's was a trivia contest about her and Chase. Let's see how well you all know us, she trilled, dimples flashing. Favorite vacation spot? She asked. Bali, cursed the cousins. Pet peeve, slow walkers, Aunt Mal shouted, earning applause. When it was my turn, Leela's eyes glittered. Okay, Emma, what's my favorite flower? My mouth went dry. I knew this answer once. Years ago, it used to be daisies. We'd pick them together as kids, but lately she had reinvented herself so many times I couldn't keep up. Roses. I guessed. She laughed, a delicate dagger. No, silly. Peonies. Come on, you should know that. The table chuckled, not cruelly, but in that indulgent way people laugh when the slow kid misses an easy question. My cheeks burned. Mom leaned in. You need to pay more attention, Emma. Family details matter. It's rude not to. I wanted to scream. She's my sister, not a pop quiz. I don't memorize her Instagram captions for sport. But I stayed silent, swallowing shame like vinegar. The humiliation didn't stop there. The following week, Mom asked me to help plan Leela's bridal shower. You're good at little tasks, she said on the phone, as though assigning chores. We'll let you handle the desserts. Keep it simple. Don't overshadow the caterer. Overshadow. As if I'd ever had the chance. I spent hours baking delicate lemon tarts and chocolate eclairs, pouring every ounce of care into them. On the day of the shower, I arrived early to set them up on trays. But when I returned from fetching napkins, I found them shoved to the far corner of the dessert table. Mom moved them, whispered Aiden, who was adjusting decorations nearby. She said they didn't match the theme. The theme was Parisian elegance. My eclairs literally fit the theme, but no one cared. Guests flocked to the glossy macarons imported from some bakery downtown, snapping photos, exclaiming, "These are divine." My desserts sat untouched, lonely soldiers waiting for orders that never came. At one point, a distant cousin picked up a tart, took a bite, and whispered to her friend, "Who made these? They're okay. Not professional." I wanted to disappear. Then came the photo session. Leela in her white dress, Mom glowing at her side, aunts and cousins clustering around like petals around a flower. Someone called, "Emma, get in the shot." I rushed forward, squeezing into the edge of the frame. The photographer frowned. "Could you step slightly back? You're blocking the light." I obeyed, shrinking into the background. Later, when Leela posted the pictures, I noticed I was cropped out entirely. The cruelty escalated in whispers and side comments. "Emma's sweet, but she doesn't really fit with this crowd. She's still figuring things out, bless her heart. Baking is nice, but it's not exactly ambitious." Each remark landed like a pebble, small on its own, but together building a mountain pressing on my chest. Mom fueled the fire. "Emma, dear, don't wear that to the rehearsal dinner. We don't want you looking frumpy in photos." Or try not to hog conversations. People want to hear about Leela and Chase. Or be supportive. This is her moment, not yours. Always the reminder, not yours. I tried to smile, to nod, to play my role. But inside, something tightened, a coil winding, winding, winding. One night, exhausted, I called Dad. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice scratchy over the line. "How's everything?" I hesitated, then told him about the toast, the trivia, the desserts. Silence stretched. Finally, he sighed. "I'm sorry, Emma. Your mom, she's always had a way of making one kid the favorite. I should have protected you from that." "Why didn't you?" I asked, raw. "I was weak," he admitted. "But you're not. Don't let them define you. You're stronger than you know." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But strength feels useless when you're drowning. The breaking point came at the rehearsal dinner. I wore a simple navy dress, hoping to blend in but still look presentable. Mom eyed me and said, "Better. At least you don't look like you borrowed from a thrift store this time." She laughed, as if it were a joke. Throughout dinner, speeches flew. Chase's parents praised Leela's warmth and intelligence. Mom gave another glowing toast about her perfect daughter. And then, without warning, she turned to me. "And of course, we're so grateful Emma could be here. She's always been dependable, a good helper. Every star needs someone steady to hold them up." The room clapped politely. I sat frozen, nails digging into my palm. A helper. That's all I'll ever be to her. Aiden caught my eye from across the table. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched. Afterward, he pulled me aside. "You don't deserve this," he said fiercely. "They're treating you like furniture." I wanted to collapse into his words, but instead I smiled weakly and said, "It's fine, I'm used to it." But I wasn't fine. Not anymore. That night, lying in bed, replaying every insult, every dismissal, every stolen moment, I realized the truth: they would never stop. Not unless I made them. The coil inside me had tightened to its limit. Something had to give, and soon it would. The night of the rehearsal dinner, I lay awake in my childhood bed staring at the floral wallpaper I once swore I'd peel off when I grew up. The laughter from earlier still echoed in my ears, but louder than the laughter was Mom's voice. "Every star needs someone steady to hold them up." I whispered the words aloud, tasting their poison. Not anymore. That was the moment the quiet volcanic heat inside me shifted. It wasn't just a simmer now, it was a decision. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The house was quiet, Mom already off running errands for the wedding, Leela at a spa appointment, Chase golfing. I sat at the kitchen table, notebook open, pen in hand. I wrote the word revenge at the top of a blank page. It startled me seeing the word in ink, but it felt right, like a confession and a promise rolled into one. I began to list possibilities. At first, silly things: switching Lila's perfume with vinegar, hiding Mom's heels before the ceremony, petty tricks that would humiliate them for a moment but change nothing. I scratched them out. Too small, too forgettable. No, my revenge had to be bigger. It had to be undeniable. It had to expose them for who they truly were: the shallow, cruel, self-obsessed family that had spent years dimming me. But how? I thought about what mattered most to them. Mom valued optics above all else. Her reputation as the perfect hostess, the flawless matriarch. Lila thrived on adoration. Every compliment, every photograph, every Instagram like was her oxygen. If I wanted to hurt them, I had to cut off their air supply. I looked around the kitchen at the spotless counters, the curated decor, the evidence of a life staged for show. And then I remembered the binder I had stumbled upon months ago when I was helping Mom organize. A binder full of receipts, bank statements, questionable transfers. I hadn't thought much of it then, chalked it up to her obsession with micromanaging finances. But now a thought sparked: what if her perfect image wasn't so perfect? I also remembered Leela's texts, the ones where she confided in me after too much wine, how Chase had been a little flirty with her friend Kelsey, how she sometimes worried he wasn't faithful, how she brushed it off because what would people think if the golden couple cracked secrets? That was it. They'd used mine against me for years. My shyness, my baking, my failures. Now it was my turn to wield theirs. I spent the next week quietly collecting. While mom napped one afternoon, I slipped into her office and photographed documents, shady, consulting, checks, evidence of unpaid taxes, a note from a country club threatening suspension for unpaid dues. The perfect matriarch, it seemed, was one missed payment away from scandal. I also started watching Chase more closely. He was slick, too slick. At the engagement party, I'd noticed the way his eyes lingered on one of Leela's bridesmaids a second too long. At the rehearsal dinner, he'd slipped away to take a call, returning with his shirt slightly rumpled. I didn't need concrete proof yet, just enough suspicion to plant seeds. Seeds that, when nurtured, could grow into chaos. At night, I poured everything into my notebook: timelines, strategies, possible outcomes. I wrote like a woman possessed because I was. Every pen stroke was a reclaiming of power, every bullet point a brick in the fortress I was building around myself. And through it all, I felt a strange exhilaration. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting, I was acting. But planning revenge wasn't just logistics, it was emotional preparation. I practiced my face in the mirror, perfecting the calm smile that would mask the storm brewing inside. I trained myself to listen without flinching when mom criticized me, to nod when Leela bragged, to absorb their cruelty without giving away the truth that I was already 3 steps ahead. It was like learning a new role. For years, I'd been cast as the supporting character, the dependable helper. Now I was rehearsing for the role of orchestrator, director of the drama to come. Sometimes doubt crept in. Late at night, I'd hear Dad's voice on the phone, telling me not to let them define me. Was revenge really the answer? Wasn't it stooping to their level? But then I'd replay Mom's toast or Leela's laughter when I got the trivia question wrong, or the sight of my desserts shoved into the corner, and the doubt hardened into resolve. This wasn't pettiness. This was justice. Aiden noticed the change in me. "You've been quiet lately," he said one evening as we walked to our cars after dinner. His eyes searched mine. "Not your usual quiet, different. Focused." I shrugged. "Maybe I'm just tired." He studied me for a long moment, then said softly, "Whatever you're planning, just be careful. Don't let them destroy you in the process." I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to spill the whole blueprint into his hands and let him share the weight. But this was my fight, my burden, my liberation. So I smiled instead. "Don't worry about me," but he did. I could see it in his eyes. As the wedding approached, my plan crystallized. Step one: expose Mom's financial secrets. I didn't need to ruin her entirely, just enough to shatter the illusion of her perfect control. A carefully timed, accidental reveal in front of the right guests would do the trick. Step two: undermine Leela and Chase's golden couple image. I didn't need proof of infidelity. Just the suggestion, whispered at the right moment, would be enough to plant doubt in Chase's family and make Leela squirm. Step three: reclaim my narrative. No more being cropped out of photos. No more being the helper in the background. I would take center stage, once decisively, spectacularly. It was risky. It was dangerous. But I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The night before the wedding, I sat in my room surrounded by notes, photographs, evidence. My heart pounded, but not with fear, with anticipation. Tomorrow was their big day, the day everything was supposed to be perfect. And tomorrow, I would show them that perfection was a lie. As I closed my notebook, I whispered the word again like a vow. Unof. The morning of the wedding dawned like every fairy tale my mother had ever sold to the world: soft sunlight, birdsong, the faint smell of roses drifting across the garden. But to me, it felt less like a fairy tale and more like a stage being set for the final act of a play. I dressed slowly, deliberately, a simple dress, pale blue, not the flattering jewel tone Mom had suggested, not something that would blend into the wallpaper. I wasn't here to blend anymore. I tucked my notebook into my bag, not because I needed it now, but because holding it gave me strength. My script, my evidence, my weapon. When I stepped outside, the house was already humming with preparation. Florists started like bees arranging blossoms. The caterers clattered trays. Photographers adjusted their lenses, hungry for beauty. And in the center of it all, like a general commanding her army, stood my mother. "Emma," she said sharply when she saw me. "Finally, you're late." "I'm here," I answered, steady. She gave me a once over, her lips twitching at my dress. "Well, at least you look decent. Remember, smile, stay out of the way, and don't make this about you." Of course, I said sweetly, and in my mind I added, just wait. The ceremony itself unfolded like a commercial, Leela radiant in her gown. Chase polished like a magazine groom. Guests dabbed at their eyes, photographers clicked like a chorus of insects. Mom sat tall, glowing with pride. I played my part, silent and smiling, until the vows ended and applause rose like a tide. Then came the reception, and that was where my plan would come alive. The ballroom glittered, chandeliers raining light, champagne flowing, laughter spilling like coins. People danced, mingled, praised. Mom thrived in the chaos, directing servers, greeting important guests. Leela soaked in every compliment, every gasp of admiration. I waited. Timing was everything. Revenge, like baking, required precision. It began small. I slipped to the coach room where the caterer's assistant had left the don't touch binder, the seating chart, vendor contacts, contingency notes. Among the papers, I placed photocopies of Mom's overdue club notices and bounced checks. I left the folder half open, just enough that when a guest inevitably peeked, curiosity would do the rest. And sure enough, within 20 minutes, whispers began. I caught fragments as people passed. Surprising, considering how she carries herself. Thought they were wealthy, but wonder how she afforded this event. Mom hadn't noticed yet, too busy glowing. But I did. I watched the cracks form, subtle but real, in the facade she polished daily, and I smiled behind my champagne glass. Step 2. The dance floor pulsed with music, couples spinning under the chandeliers. Leela and Chase took the center, the golden couple, basking in the adoration. I drifted to the edge where one of the bridesmaids, Kelsey, the one I'd seen Chase eyeing too long, stood with her phone. I leaned close, my voice low, conspiratorial. Be careful, I murmured. She blinked at me. What? Chase, I said. He's charming, maybe too charming. Her cheeks colored. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? I tilted my head. Funny how he slipped away at the rehearsal dinner, and how he was whispering with you last night when Leela wasn't looking. Her eyes widened. He wasn't. I shrugged, feigning innocence. Maybe I'm mistaken. Just don't be surprised if others notice too. Then I drifted away, leaving the seed planted, and by the time dessert was served, I saw Kelsey whispering to another bridesmaid, her face tight. Saw Chase frown when confronted, brushing it off too quickly. Saw Leela glance between them, suspicion flickering in her perfect smile. The cracks widened. Finally, step 3, reclaiming my own voice. Dinner was winding down when Mom rose, tapping her glass for attention. A toast, she declared, to my daughter and her wonderful new husband. May their lives together be as flawless as today. The room cheered. Leela beamed. Chase raised his glass. And then before the applause could fade, I stood. May I say something? The room turned. Dozens of eyes blinked at me. Mom's smile froze. Emma, she said tightly. Not now, but I kept my voice calm even. Just a few words. Aiden, seated near the back, caught my eye and gave the faintest nod. Courage pulsed through me. I raised my glass. To Leela, to Chase, to family. My tone was steady, my smile practiced, but also to truth. Because a marriage built on half-truths is like a cake without flour. It looks good, but it crumbles the second you touch it. A murmur rippled. Leela's brow furrowed. Ema, what are you? Lila, I continued gently. You've always been the star. And Mom, you've always made sure of that. But stars cast shadows. And sometimes those shadows are darker than anyone admits. Yeah. Mom's voice was sharp now, warning. Sit down. I didn't. My hands didn't even shake. All my life, I've been told to stay in the background, to support, to be practical. But tonight, your perfect night. I just want to remind everyone that perfection is an illusion. The whispers surged louder. Someone near the coach room held up a paper from the binder. Is this true? He asked aloud, waving the overdue notices. Mom's face drained of color. That's private. Who? There's more, I said softly, my voice carrying anyway. Secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when the people keeping them use others as shields. Chase stepped forward, trying to laugh. All right, let's calm down. But Kelsey's voice cut through. Why don't you tell them what you whispered to me last night? The room gasped. Leela spun toward her. What? I didn't. Chase started, but the damage was done. The murmurs became a roar. Guests shifted uncomfortably, phones out, recording. Leela's perfect smile cracked, her hands trembling. Mom hissed my name like it was a curse. I set my glass down. For once, I said clearly, this isn't about you. It's about me. And I won't be invisible anymore. And with that, I walked off the stage. The chaos erupted behind me. Mom chasing after guests, insisting everything was fine. Leela shouting at Chase, tears smudging her makeup. Cousins gossiping, snapping photos. The illusion had shattered, pieces scattered across the dance floor. For once, I wasn't the helper cleaning up. I wasn't the shadow making room for the star. For once, I was the storm. The music didn't stop right away. It stuttered, tried to recover, as if the band could play loud enough to drown out the sound of a life cracking. But shock has its own rhythm, and soon even the drummer understood there was no beat to find. The chandeliers still glittered. The roses still perfumed the air, but the room had shifted from cathedral to crime scene. My mother's voice, usually the first responder to any social emergency, fractured into fragments. It's a mistake, private, family matter. Put that phone away. I stepped into a corridor humming with the building's old electricity and leaned my forehead against a cool pane of glass. The glass didn't care who the favorite was. It didn't care about seating charts or overdue dues or whispers. It just kept the weather where it belonged. Aiden found me there. Hey. He didn't ask if I was okay. He looked at me like a person who'd watched a long storm map finally match the sky. I didn't plan for it to be that loud, I said, which was true and not true. I had planned for truth. I hadn't planned for the room to turn itself inside out. Loud was the only volume they could hear you in, he said. A beat. Somewhere behind us, Leela's voice rose, sharp as broken crystal. Chase's voice followed, too smooth, like a salesman explaining why a crack is a feature, not a flaw. I felt a pulse of pity for her and resented it. Compassion is a stubborn vine. It grows even in poor soil. It's done, I said. It's begun, Aiden corrected softly. We stood like that for a while, two figures in a hallway listening to the ceremony that wasn't ours end for a second time. By the next morning, the story had metastasized. That's what happens when a roomful of people with phones becomes a distribution channel. Perfect wedding rocked by family drama, said a local gossip blog that loved our mother when she was feeding them. Country club queen and cash crunch, wondered a forum where the wealthy stalked one another's status like skittish deer. Screenshots of the overdue notices sprouted on anonymous accounts. Someone had recorded the moment Kelsey's voice cut through the reception. The clip was unforgiving. No filter softened the way Leela's smile liquefied. Mom called at 6 a.m. and left a message bow tight in venom, tipped, "What you did was unforgivable. You humiliated me. You humiliated your sister. You destroyed her wedding." She said wedding like it was a monument, not an event. Then, softer, more dangerous, "Come home. We will discuss how you fix this." I didn't go home. Instead, I made coffee in my small kitchen and opened the windows to let in honest air. The city was waking, buses exhaling, a kid clattering a skateboard, a bakery 2 blocks over sending up the smell of industrious sugar. I took my notebook from the counter and turned to the last page I'd written the night before. The ink had bled a little, a dark halo around the word at the center enough. My phone vibrated again. Dad, you all right, kiddo? His voice had sleep in it and something like wonder. I don't know, I admitted. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I feel hollow and relieved and sick and free. That sounds like the truth's aftertaste, he said. I'm proud of you. I swallowed. I had not expected to cry, but the body does what it needs. I didn't do it to hurt her. I did it to stop being hurt. I know, he said. And she'll hate that even more. Leela texted at noon. No punctuation, like she was sprinting. What did you do? I typed and erased several answers before sending the most honest one. I stopped helping you pretend. 3 dots. Disappear. Return. Is this about the brunch? The toast? You could have just told me. I remembered her confetti text, "Don't be dramatic tonight. It's my turn." I thought of the trivia questions, the way everyone laughed like I was a slow student in a fast class. I wrote, "I told you 100 times in 100 small ways. You only listen to spotlights," she called. I let it ring out. A minute later, another text arrived, ragged where the punctuation finally broke through. "You embarrassed me. Did you want him to leave me ATTC Weediange?" I didn't answer that he'd already left her in at least one way. That's not a map you hand someone while they're still learning which direction is down. Hours later, she called again. This time I picked up. "Why me?" She said, "No hello. Why would you do this to me?" "Because you're the star." I kept my voice level. "And you never asked where the light came from." What does that even? She started, then exhaled hard. "Chase says you're jealous. Chase also says he didn't whisper to Kelsey," I said. And yet, silence. When Leela spoke again, her voice was smaller, the voice of the girl who used to crawl into my bed. If he cheated, she stopped. If he was going to, why would you ruin my day instead of warning me before? Because warnings don't work in our house, I said. They get turned into insults about being dramatic or ungrateful. The only language anyone speaks there is spectacle. She didn't like that. She liked it enough to sit with it. I hate you, she said finally, like an old ritual she couldn't skip. And then, so quietly, I almost missed it. I don't know who I am if I'm not perfect. You're my sister, I said. Start there. The line went dead. I placed the phone face down and pressed my palms to the table until I felt the grain of the wood steady me. The fallout came in layers. First, the marriage, a pause, they called it publicly. We're taking some private time to focus on each other. Privately, it devolved immediately into inventory. Who owned which gifts? Which deposits were refundable? Who had texted whom and when? The clip of Kelsey spread faster than any official statement. Chase hired a PR friend to smear it as deepfake adjacent. Nobody believed him. People preferred the glamour of the mess. Second, mom. The overdue notices were the least of it. Once a door is open, people peek. Rumors matured into allegations. She'd misrepresented a charity gala's proceeds. She'd used event deposits to float personal expenses. She'd built a brand out of air and borrowed money. Her lawyer issued a statement about clerical errors. The club suspended her pending review. She announced she needed a rest from public duties and retreated, which meant she shouted at assistants in a smaller room. Third, me. For a week, my phone was a flicker show. Strangers calling me brave, cruel, psychotic, a cautionary tale, a folk hero. A podcaster asked for an interview. A woman from my high school wrote a long message about all the times my mother had frozen her out of parent committees and how satisfying it was to see ice thaw. Another woman admonished me for ruining a sacred day. Revenge, she DM'd, is never sweet. I blocked her and baked a test batch of orange cardamom shortbread that made the whole apartment smell like a small sun. In the middle of the noise, Aiden texted Park, 20 minutes. We sat on a bench under a tree that had decided it was nearly fall. He didn't ask about the headlines. He handed me a coffee and pointed at a dog, trying very hard to convince a pigeon to be friends. When we finally spoke, it was about craft. You've always built worlds with your hands, he said. Cookies, drawings, little plans that fit in notebooks. What are you going to build now that the big thing has broken? I didn't have to think. The plan had been unspooling in my mind every time I'd written enough. A kitchen? I said. Not just mine. A place where people like me, people told to support, not star, can learn to make something and sell it. A shared space. A small business incubator with ovens. He grinned, sunlight cutting a bright notch in his hair. A quiet volcano with rentable stations. I laughed. It came out clear exactly. Name. I looked at my hands. They were dusted with flour I hadn't realized was still there. Hearth, I said. Because it's the heart. And because no one owns fire. I found a space a month later, a narrow, stubborn storefront on a street still recovering from the last economic fever. The rent was barely survivable. The floors needed work, the old hood sighed like a smoker. I signed anyway, with a ferocity that would have terrified the girl who used to ask permission to breathe. Word traveled, not the way scandals travel, but the way recipes do, hand to hand with intention. The woman from the farmer's market who'd once come back for a custom order now knew a chocolatier looking for a tiny kitchen twice a week. A pair of twins who sold savory tarts wanted evening access. A retired line cook with a dream of making vegan bacca wrote me a letter with a drawing of a braid. I met them all, listened, ran numbers, sketched schedules. I made a sliding scale that felt like justice instead of charity. I built a website with photos that smelled like butter, and I wrote the copy like I was talking to the person I used to be. Bring the thing they told you was just a hobby. We'll treat it like it matters. On opening day, Dad stood in the doorway with a ridiculous bouquet shaped like a rolling pin. For the ribbon, he said, and the wrists that cut it. Aiden hung a hand-painted sign that made the storefront look like it meant it. Maria set up a coffee urn the size of an engine. The twins carried in their tins. The Bacca man cried quietly when his first proters sold out in 4 hours. I baked trays of the orange cardamom shortbread and wrote small labels in my careful print. The bell over the door became a song. Money changed hands. So did stories. People asked if I'd read the blog, seen the comments, heard that my mother had started a new consultancy called Strength and Grace, where she taught resilience in crisis. I said no and meant it. My crisis was busy making bread. A month passed the way honest work passes. measured in muscle memory and small successes. I learned exactly how long the ovens took to forgive a mistake. I learned which neighbor would trade me produce for day-old loaves. I learned how to tell a young baker that their first batch wasn't good enough without suggesting that they weren't either. The space changed people. That was the secret I hadn't known I was after. When you give someone a station and a timer and permission, they expand to fill the outline of the job, then redraw it larger. Leela came by just once at first, standing outside with sunglasses like a celebrity trying not to be one. I came to the door, wiped my hands on my apron, and waited. I didn't want to text, she said, pushing the sunglasses up. Her eyes were red mascara galaxy at the edges. Texts are screenshots now. We both huffed a laugh. Then we didn't laugh. How is he? I asked carefully. Chase is doing brand rehab, she said, rolling her eyes at herself. We're. She let the word wobble. He said I cared more about the wedding than the marriage. I told him he cared more about looking loyal than being it. She shrugged. We're taking a pause from the pause. I'm sorry, I said, and I was. A ceremony is a promise you make in public to do the private work later. She had been good at the public. No one had taught us the private. She glanced past me into the shop. It smells like God, like when we were little and you made me those shortbread moons. A smile tried to happen at the corner of her mouth. You named it Hearth. She nodded, as if that explained something she'd needed explained for years. I brought you something. She handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a check with more zeros than my rent. An investment, she said before I could protest. No strings. Or, she held up a finger, one string. I want to learn how to make those moons myself. We stared at each other like a mirror, trying to remember which of us was the original. Then I stepped aside and let her in. Prawns by the sink. The first batch was a disaster. She overworked the dough. The moons came out steroidal. We laughed so hard the twins threatened to unionize against noise. The second batch was better. By the third, she was pressing a thumbprint into each cookie like a blessing. Mom would hate this, she said, and there was no triumph in it, just a new understanding of inheritance. She'd say I was wasting time. She'd ask me what the optics are. What are they? I asked. She lifted a cookie to eye level like she was sighting a star. They're warm, she said. They don't photograph well. You have to be here. We ate the broken ones. We packed the good ones into a tin and labeled it Lila's Moons Imperfect on purpose. By afternoon, they were gone. Mom did not come. She sent a message through an aunt the way a monarch sends a summons to a wayward general. She says she's ready to talk. The aunt relayed, wringing her hands. She says she forgives you? I didn't ask, I said gently. A week later, a letter arrived on heavy stationery with a crest she'd recently invented. It was both an apology and not. Every I'm sorry yoke to a but you. I'm sorry you felt humiliated, but you should have told me privately. I'm sorry about the toast, but you know I only meant to motivate you. There was a postscript about optics. I put the letter in a drawer with the rubber bands and extra tags, useful someday for holding something closed. Then, on a rain-streaked Thursday between the Baka man's morning shift and the twins' afternoon, she walked in. The bell announced her like every other person. She looked smaller without a crowd to scale her against. She wore armor, a coat expensive enough to be its own argument, a scarf that said, I thrive. Her eyes did not. Hearth, she read from the sign. Clever. Thank you. I said, not offering more. She stood in the space the way a person stands in a country they don't have a map for. I wanted to see where you ended up. I didn't end up, I said. I started a flinch, then a regroup. You were cruel, she said. At the wedding, you were, for 20 years, I answered. I matched your tone. She studied my face like there was a code in it. I was hard on you because I knew the world would be. I thought if I made you tough, you'd survive. I did, I said. Just not the way you meant. Silence opened like a door. She could step through it or leave. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to hold it. What do you want from me? She asked finally. Nothing, I said. It was the most radical answer I'd ever given her. You don't get to be the sun I orbit anymore. She inhaled, as if the room had thinned. Then what am I to you? A woman who did her best with the tools she had and often chose the wrong ones, I said. A woman who loves her image and sometimes her daughters. A woman who could learn if she wants to. And if I don't, then you'll look at me from across rooms and wonder why it feels colder. Her mouth pulled tight, then loosened. She looked around at the racks, the ovens, the bulletin board where our renters posted thank you notes and smudged thumbprints. She picked up a cookie from the tray by the register, paid for it with exact change like old ladies do, and held it without eating. This place smells like when you were little, she said, and for a second I saw the mother who used to braid my hair too tight because she didn't know any other way to hold me together. I should have come to your graduation. Yes, I said. I didn't soften the word. You should have. She nodded. The armor didn't clatter off. That's not how armor works. But she put the cookie in her purse like it was proof. I don't know how to be here, she admitted so quietly I almost missed it. Then be a customer, I said. Start there. She left. The bell made no judgment. I exhaled a breath I'd been holding since I was 7. In the evenings, after the ovens cooled and the last runner swept their station like a prayer, I sat at the small metal table in the back and wrote, not plans now, not defenses, but recipes that read like letters to who I had been. Add salt, more than you think, it makes the sweet honest. Rest the dough. Patience is part of the flavor. I wrote about heat, how it transforms, how it can ruin, how it can cure, how the same fire that burns the roof of your mouth can make a crust sing. Sometimes Aiden stayed, shouldering a bag of flour like it was nothing. Sometimes Dad called to say his fishing was terrible and his life was good. Sometimes Leela FaceTimed from a kitchen messy with her own attempt at dinner and said, I told Mom therapy isn't failure. Sometimes I closed my eyes and saw the old mantel painting the way I'd imagined it that first night, us in motion, not posed, not perfect, not pretending. I did not become a star. I built a hearth. Stars are light you can't touch. A hearth is heat you share. On the anniversary of the wedding, someone tagged the shop in a post, a photo of our bulbous loaves and cracked cookies and a caption that made my chest ache with a clean kind of pride. We got married last year on the same day as the infamous Truth wedding. It read, we came to Hearth to celebrate surviving our first year with imperfect bread. The owner said imperfection is a texture, not a flaw. We believe her. After closing, I stepped out the back door into air so cool it felt like a rinse. The city hummed a lullaby made of buses and a neighbor practicing scales on a trumpet. I held a still, warm loaf like a living thing and thought of my mother's toast, my sister's tears, my own small voice saying enough to the dark. Enough. I said again now, not as an end this time, but as a measure. Enough cruelty, enough silence. Enough finally of me, of my hands, my heat, my work, the life-size life no one else got a size for me. The kiln inside me glowed steady, not a wildfire, a held fire, the kind you can build a night around.